I'm your host, Carmilla, and this is Cat Scratch Radio, a horror podcast. Hey everybody, this is Cat Scratch Radio. I'm your host, Carmilla Mays, and I'm here with psychology teacher and author David Sims. So, David, tell me about yourself.
Well, I currently teach, psychology in two different colleges and in a high school. Taught many varieties of psych, from forensic and criminal things to abnormal and the basic things. And also, I've been a therapist on the side as well. I've usually worked with teens and younger people and with my degree in I have a master's degree in psychology, another degree in special ed, and one in English. So none of them are too important, but it gives me reasons not to be bored. So yeah, that's where I am with the education part of it.
Awesome. So tell me about psychology and how it connects with horror.
Okay, this is a fun topic, and I love talking about this whenever I go to the bigger writing conferences. We usually do a panel of the psychology of horror. There are a few reasons why people really love it, and it's as simple as like why we go to an amusement park and ride the roller coaster. It's an adrenaline shot. It's an adrenaline junkie. It's a same thing. And you think about why people like horror. You can do whatever you want to. I mean, you can experience the most hideous, horrible, thrilling, crazy things between the pages. And if it gets too much, you just slam the book shut, and you can pick it up when you're ready for it. And if it's too scary for you, you move on to the next one. Um, Psychology, I mean, it lets you role play, and it lets you take some rides in other people's shoes that you would never have a chance to do. You can, be chased by a serial killer. You can be a serial killer and do this, and it's a great role play where you don't have to worry about any other aspect of a judgment or anything else. And with the horror part of it, again, it's like every day, every night can be Halloween, but it's even better because you're in your own head, and the chemicals that are unleashed internally they can rival what it would actually be like to be chased or to be seriously frightened.
Oh yeah, definitely I can see that. So a lot of the people that I've interviewed on this podcast have told me that the reason they got into writing horror or reading horror was actually because of trauma. Do you see that a lot?
Oh,
And
oh, absolutely. Say the book I'm writing right now. I'm finishing a new book for Elizabeth Massey's Marriage Scare series, and writing a book about Alaska. And one of my traumas is claustrophobia for some crazy stuff that happened to me as a kid. And you know what? I've never faced it head on before until just this past weekend. I wrote a scene that left me twitching, the anxiety like pulsing through my body. But afterwards, I felt like I just went through like a psychological car wash. Everything just like came out, and I've done that in several of my novels where I somehow either consciously or subconsciously just face with that trauma, whether it's something that happened to me in with my family, something that happened with relationship, or violent episode that I've encountered. I've had somebody try to kill me before, so it's like all those things have a way of bleeding itself onto the page. No pun intended.
I definitely agree. Trauma is one of the reasons that I personally also gotten into horror, and also why I'm in therapy. But
Aren't we all? I mean, and I'm not joking about that. I think therapy is one of the best things in the world.
so, what personally got you into horror?
Honestly, my parents showed me Jaws when I was a little kid, way too young, and it scared the living hell out of me. So much so I wouldn't go swimming in our backyard pool. And then, but I realized afterwards, even though it scared me, I loved the feeling. And coincidentally or not coincidentally, my dad took me on one of the biggest roller coasters in Coney Island up in New York, the same year. So I realized, hey, this is just as much fun as watching a scary movie. There's no consequences. Um, and then I went down that rabbit hole from there to sneaking on to TV and watching scary movies either by myself or with my parents. And then when I started reading, um, found myself reaching more for the darker tales, even if it was a young mystery or something else, and then diving into Stephen King by the age of 10. I always liked that scare. I always liked that, yeah, watching it from a safe distance and feeling like, okay, this is okay compared to everything else in the world. This is a pretty safe and pretty fun way to experience life.
Yeah. Do you think that thrill seeking has a lot to do with the cathartic nature of, dealing with trauma and stuff like that in a safe space?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's we joke in my classroom, my high school classroom about this. We because I am, I have a safe space sign on my door, and the kids all know what that typically means. And then they say, well, you know what? We should also put that on there because of some of the movies you show us, and we laugh about it. And I said, okay, do you want to watch something more tame? That's like, oh hell no, we want to watch the scary stuff. So I mean, so it's kind of like, and then I've given them articles about what we were just talking about, why people love that safe space of horror. Because then again, just I keep on harkening back to it, just that it's almost like a live action role play thing, but it's or virtual reality video game or something where you're totally immersed in experience. So yeah, and just and last year in the classroom we tried something with the Oculus glasses, and it scared the hell out of a couple of kids. However, I told them, I said, you know what, take it off. And they took it off. I said, wait a minute, this is really cool, let's put it back on. So that safe space is both literal and figurative here.
I love that. I think it's really important, especially when people are dealing with things like um, trauma at home or anything like that, that having a safe space outside of that is naturally something that is desired.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, I mean, if you have to, obviously you wouldn't question this, but for other people who don't understand, I mean, look at the biggest holiday in America. It's Halloween. Halloween is bigger than anything else. I mean, maybe not by sheer sales, but in terms of celebration and how it goes through a whole year. I mean, some people decorate how for Halloween and all year long. I know I do. Um,
Mhm.
so, which I think it should be mandatory. I mean, even in my own town, I lead a ghost tour in my town, and we saw three houses already decked out for Halloween. So I think I mean, it's part of our culture. Our culture loves to be scared, and it's a great way to cope with, yeah, the trauma, but just the daily stressors. I mean, look at all the crap we have to deal with on a daily basis in today's world. It's it's a hell of a lot easier and a lot more fun just to decorate for scary things, to dress up for scary things, and just kind of live that fun, vicarious life with no, without the repercussions.
And it's interesting that you bring that up. Do you have you noticed the connection between the LGBT community and Halloween and how strong that is?
Oh God, yeah, yeah. I'm a writer. I mean, I mean, we're such a strong ally for everybody, and like, a lot of my friends, on all sides of everything, and yeah, because as I mean, again, I have so many students who have gone through hell, and so many of my friends and family members who have gone through pure hell with this. And but again, it's that safe thing that, like, okay, we I'm saying we as not me, but in general, they have to go through so much. Everything from from the lightest thing to the most horrific episodes of what goes on, and then but for Halloween, it's again, you step into a different world, you step into a different dimension where you can kind of just again enjoy the scare without the craziness, about of reality, if that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely makes sense to me. Hopefully, it makes sense to my listeners too.
I'm sure it does. I mean, because again, I think because it's such uh again, why do people dress up and go to Ren fairs? Why do people go to Rocky Horror movies? Why do people love to do things for other holidays and everything else? Because it's fun and because they get to step outside. And one of my favorite psychologists, Carl Jung, has this thing that he believes in is the masks, the hero's masks that everybody has these different masks they wear during different times of their life. Whether for me as a teacher, as a student, as a musician, as an author, as a ghost tour guide, or whatever else it is. I mean, and sometimes I'm different people, and they're in different situations. We all are, and with horror and everything else, you can wear those different masks at different times. And again, some of them are extremely fun to wear. Some of them are frightening to wear. But again, at the end of the day, you can always take that mask right off your face. And I think that's the allure of so much of this.
Yeah, I I definitely agree. I actually collect masks, which is
Oh, cool.
a side note, but I love them. I love that metaphorically and physically. It's like you put a mask on and you hide it. And as somebody who's autistic myself, I've learned a lot about the differences between masking in public and just being myself.
Hmm.
And I have loved the way disguises work in literature and even in my own writing. I have a character who's a priest, but he's not actually a priest, he's actually a demon.
Wow.
And so it's one of my favorite things about horror is that metaphorical mask.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, think. I mean, and why are some of the most notorious characters in horror movies wearing masks? Jason, Michael, other creatures. Now the newer aspects of horror movies, and then if you turn it over to music, I mean, you have a band like Slipknot, where it's like their whole identity is based on masks and everything like that. Horror is the whole thing of like just wearing that mask. And again, because again, nobody, whether you go back to the olden days where why masquerades were invented, just so you can hide who you are for a night and become something else, become somebody else, you get in touch with your dark side and enjoy it. Again, it goes back hundreds of years. So, I mean, it's no surprise that it's such a big thing now. With again, every time the world takes a downturn in its sanity, I mean, horror has an upturn.
Yeah, I think that interesting enough that do you remember the event that happened in 2016 where there were clowns just standing on corners in the US?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. Talk about talk about freaky. And yeah. And I mean, I think we can put two and two together and like figure out why 2016. But
Yeah.
um, yeah. I mean, that would be much more palatable than what actually happened. Um, but yeah, I think that was just a natural reaction to stress. And then like again, I mean, the world's going to hell, and like let's have a reaction that's going to be at least in our vision even scarier than the reality. But again, with the clowns that were happening, I mean, my take on it, because I talked to a lot of horror writers at the time, and we were saying, what the hell's going on here? But then they were saying, it's like, you know what? So many of those people who are out there in reality would rather spend the next few years with a clown that's coming after me with a knife than, well, the other side. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I just think that that connection of the how stressful 2016 was and just how it reacted in society was fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it's and again, I would love to get a list of the best, uh, the highest rated movies and shows at that time, and seeing how many of them were horror related or just speculative related and things like that, just to see how much it mirrored society at that point. Um, But again, you think about, oh geez, so yeah, from there. But again, you go back way back to that whole "Ring Around the Rosie" song that came out. I mean, it was all based on the bubonic plague. People find a way to cope with stuff, um, and yeah, it's absolutely bonkers. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but on my Ghost tour, I put something in there about my second novel, Fear the Reaper, which is about eugenics in America, which was pretty much scary because we basically inspired the hell out of Hitler for that.
Hmm.
And the German and Austrian immigrants that came over to Virginia at the time, they brought with them not Santa Claus, but they brought Krampus. Which, like, why the hell would you bring over this demonic beast and then dress up like him on every Christmas Eve to scare the crap out of kids? And it's something through my research I can never find out why. And I'm thinking maybe it was just the experiences of the immigrants at that time. Because again, at that point, coming over to certain areas of the states, I mean, even if you're Irish, German, Austrian, you were still treated like a third-rate citizen. So, I mean, it's who knows? It could have been that. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but who knows?
Yeah, that's an interesting. I would think that because so I'm half Native American on my dad's side,
Uh-huh.
and we have uh Pukwudgies,
Hmm.
which are they're like little people, and
Yes.
they're used to keep kids out of like the water, out of the forest and stuff like that, so to scare them into behaving. And I think Krampus is very much that same way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and it's funny you mentioned it. I mean, I don't want to stop. Please tell me if I'm interrupting you. I mean, because sometimes I can go off. But again, I was just reading about those little people in the book because it's funny you mentioned those because the novel I'm writing two at once. Is basically it's all about cryptids, and I've been researching cryptids everywhere, all over the United States and around the world, and spent some time in the Cryptozoology Museum up in Maine this summer, and we were talking about that and how again so many of these creatures or little people or whatever you want to go with are there for either protective reason or have some kind of like a double-edged story. It's like, hey, you know what? It's a cautionary tale. So basically, you can have something good happen. However, there's a dark side to everything, and I think that that's the birth of so many of these monsters in society. Or at least the monster with a kind face or something that could turn its back on you is again just as a way to try to protect our kids from the horrors of the real world.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's where a lot of things like vampires and werewolves and stuff kind of spawn from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, because if you think about vampires, I mean, it came out through Vlad the Impaler, of a real person, but again, through it's but vampire lore goes back, way, way, way back, um, and again, it's been told through feminist lens. It's been told through different cultural lenses and things like that. It's been through just about every culture out there has some type of vampire lore, and I think it's fun in a lot of ways because you can say here's some monstrous thing. However, it's like wouldn't you like to live forever? Wouldn't you like to shed the skin of being a human with all its frailties and everything else? You can kind of just jump out and be this superhero, even though it's kind of evil and everything else, but it's a fun thing, and to think that it's been there for so long in our culture, many cultures, it's fascinating.
Yeah, what I really love about vampires, werewolves, and stuff like that is that in modern times now we're seeing a lot more romanticization of it, like zombies too. We're seeing things like iZombie come out where the zombies are romanticized. There's Twilight, there's Interview with a Vampire, things like that, and we've ever since Bram Stoker's Dracula, we've just been eroticizing and romanticizing these monsters.
Yeah, and it's fun. We keep on doing it. I mean, think about. I mean, every one of my students, they say, "Okay, have you watched The Vampire Diaries?" I said, "No," but they said you should. Why? Because it's cool. You done this, and then I said, "Have you watched Interview with the Vampire and some other things, or Near Dark and all these other cool things?" And they're like, "No," and then we trade off things. And I was just reading because I'm also a book reviewer on the side because free books. Um, Rachel Harrison's new book that's coming out is called So Thirsty. It's a highly eroticized
Hmm.
vampire novel, and basically the whole gist of it is she just wants to survive and move on from a cheating husband, and so she gets the offer to become immortal, and she just says, "You know what? Life is 100 times better this way." And it's like nobody blinks because okay, let's just roll with it. And it's just fun because again, it's romanticized because it's fun, and even when it's ugly, it's fun because I think everybody has that those deep dark wishes that they hide from society. I mean, I hate to keep on pulling out quotes here, but I know one of my favorite quotes is by Mark Twain. It says everybody has a dark side, just like the dark side of the moon that he or she never shows to anybody else. And I think that's key here because we all have something, some kind of shadow deep within ourselves, and some people are good at letting it out safely, appropriately, and some of us are afraid to. And I think that horror lets us shed that and let it come out and play in a socially acceptable way.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up Rachel Harrison, 'cause she's an excellent author that I just recently discovered. I'm very looking forward to So Thirsty.
Yeah,
Uh, um, so when it comes to writing, do you think that it's a really great way for people to learn to cope with their mental illnesses and other traumas?
absolutely. Besides teaching psych, I also teach creative writing, and I've done that. Not that I'm great at it, but I've done it for years. And it's funny at the end of each little area, some of my students have written on the boards like, "This isn't creative writing; it's therapy 101." And because I just tell them, I give them a whole lot of psychological exercises. Like here, if you can't write about yourself, write about the exact opposite of you. Write about your shadow self or something else. What would be the opposite? And have fun in that skin for a little while. Um, and I think um, you can just step in. I mean, again, it's role playing, it's acting, it's becoming. To a novel that I'm trying to sell right now to agents. It's about a married couple who are both serial killers. I mean, and from their point of view, and it's a little tongue in cheek. It's horror, but it's also a thriller, but it's other things. But again, it knows where it is and how it's playing with itself there. And again, I want to work with that. What would be to be inside the mind of a psychopath or a sociopath, and both in this case, and then just to step into that world. What are they thinking? How are they processing? How are they dealing with those dark desires from that first person point of view there? And my God, it is so therapeutic. Um, Again, and I mean, my writing is tame compared to some of the darkest stuff out there. I can only imagine. I don't know if you've ever read Jack Ketchum.
No, I have not.
Okay, if you ever have a chance to, well, actually, I shouldn't because it probably traumatizes me. The Girl Next Door, one of the most famous uh, real horror novels, nothing supernatural, is traumatic to read. However, for anybody who's gone through anything, it's therapeutic. And some other thing, he writes the most uh, gut wrenching, soul tearing horror. When he was alive. And however, I mean, and people say, "Oh, this is horrible, this is awful, everything," but we all have read him. I mean, anybody who was a fan when he passed away a few years ago, but he would reach into the deepest and darkest things. I mean, before splatterpunk was a thing, I mean, he was writing some of these things, but it was more than that. It was more like splattering your soul all over a page. And but yet we had to talk several times. We got to be friends, and he would tell me, he said, "You know what? He's like, everything I leave on the page and everybody knew him as one of the world's biggest sweethearts. He would do anything for everybody. I mean, he was always taking pictures of his cats and everything else. He was the nicest guy, and he said, I learned it from Stephen King. It's like you bleed it out on a page, and you can feel clean for a while. And I thought that was fascinating. And I said, buddy, he's like, you must bleed a whole hell of a lot to get everything out of your system. He's like, I do. So I think that's really cool. Because again, I think that the some of the best people out in horror are some of the most well adjusted as well. Because
Yeah, I think it's like a form of therapy. And one of my past interviews that I did with Zoe Bell Canope, I believe was the last name.
hmm,
Uh, they were telling me about how being in therapy has helped them work through a lot of the problems in their own writing, along with their stuff that they've been through. And uh, I couldn't have agreed more because, as somebody who goes to therapy every Friday, it's something I do ritualistically now. Um, I find myself being more confident in my ability to write spooky things, horrible things, without feeling like crumpled up in it.
okay, and let me turn the table on you. If you don't want to answer, that's fine. But why do you think that is? Why do you think therapy's helped you in that way to feel more comfortable?
I think it's helped me a lot in a way to make sense of things rather than feeling like I'm stuck in a fog, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you used it. That's a great metaphor there. The fog there is huge because again, what does trauma do to us? It confuses us. It does blur our vision of reality, and like we can't see things clearly. I mean, as somebody, I've gone through different therapists as well through things for anxiety, for PTSD, from other things, near school shooting to attempted murder. I know other people have it 10 times worse than I do, but I know that um, working through something, it will come out in my writing somehow. It comes out, and again, I also am a musician, so I'll sit here with my guitar sometimes and I'll write some stuff, and sometimes it'll mirror what's going through my psyche at that time. Sometimes they'll come out happy and just relaxing. Sometimes full bore metal things that just will just kind of act as a nice little faucet for whatever's bothering me. But again, it's amazing how if once you learn the tools of therapy, once you learn from the most basics of breathing to visualization of what's going on in your head, what's bothering you, to uh, proper displacement, to like, here, you know what, this is really stressing me out. So instead of like doing something that's unhealthy for myself, let me do it to something unhealthy in my story or in play or something else. And I think that finding that healthy displacement there is such a, it's like taking anchors off your shoulders.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely feel that. And um it's one of the big reasons that I think that I've gotten into horror. I mean, I've always had a love for horror since I was little. Um I dealt a lot with childhood neglect and found myself in horror movies as a kid. So like 7, 8 years old watching it on TV with um no one around me to protect me from it. So
That's a
uh
great age for it. Yeah.
yeah, good time to be afraid of clowns for the rest of your life. um, but yeah, I think that it really does make a difference if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think, I mean, you mentioned about you watching it when you were 8. You know what? As many people would say, okay, that's way too young, you're whatever. Um, I mean, I think in some ways, it for certain people it could help, and we really could, and certain people it could traumatize them more. But again, I think the earlier you are at least exposed to something, whether again, I think horror movies are great safe spaces if we went back to before. My son watches horror movies, and and so he'll tell me sometimes, so you know what, this is too much. I got to shut this off. I said, okay, but then all of a sudden, we go see, The Evil Dead, or something else in the theaters, and it's like, this is really cool. But again, and then get to Halloween, is dressing up as the most hideous creature out there. He said, I want to scare the living crap out of everybody out there. So it's again. This way, I mean, he hasn't gone through any terrible trauma, thank God. But I mean, yeah, but I think it's preparing him for when something does happen. It gives him, he's seen these things. It's not so much shielded from some of the horrors of reality. But it's a very soft. I'm trying to get a right analogy here, but it's a very soft cushion. The blood-soaked cushion, a very prickly cushion, but I think it's a great, not gateway, but it's just kind of like kind of like an intro course into the horror of life. I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways that reality can be 10 times worse than what we see in horror movies and in novels. And I find it very soothing to know that I can go into a fictional world and be like, okay, this is bad. These are horrible things that are happening, but it's fiction.
Hmm. Yeah, it really is. I mean, and I talk again, especially in psychology, we talk about things, and then we one of my favorite things to talk about is phobias. What are you afraid of, and why? And we go through some of the silliest things, some of the more traumatic things, and people say, okay, well, I got attacked by a dog when I was young, so I'm afraid of, or I got trapped in an elevator, or something else, or something 10 times more traumatic, that's real trauma. And we'll talk about it, and every once in a while we'll go through the steps of how to shed that phobia, or the trauma. It's like, here, through different things, by watching something with it, or exposing yourself to that little spider on a screen, or that snake on a computer, or something else. And
Mhm.
again, just to live through it. But again, you can kind of like face up to it, whereas a lot of things that kids and adults go through. I mean, the novel, that I finished, is all about human trafficking, and I've worked with so many people who've gone through things like that, and and again, it's terrifying. And I know I wrote about it because I mean, I need something to cope with after hearing these horror stories all day long. So again, it helped me to deal with it, and I asked them, I said, what do you deal with? And these younger people are struggling to find a tool to cope with. But again, they might find it in a scary movie, and I think that's a great way to use it as not a crutch, but as a tool.
Yeah, I definitely see it more as a tool than a crutch. It's something that you can fall into and honestly relax for a little while.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, because I mean, if you talk, I mean, if you've read interviews with some of the biggest names out there, whether it's in horror fiction or horror movies, I remember talking to Tom Savini, the makeup artist for the Living Dead movies, Night of the Living Dead movies, and so much more. And he did, I mean, he did some gross stuff. I participated in some of the makeup things where guts are flying everywhere, and everything else, and everybody's sitting there and playing in the blood and rolling around in it. And he said, "Isn't this glorious?" And it's like, yeah, it is. It's amazing, but you're taking something that could be in real life. I mean, it would ruin somebody. However, but again, having that thin veneer, that little barrier between you and that true horror there, can make all the difference. And I think that for maybe I don't want to speak for you, but for me, and friends of mine have gone through some terrible things. It's a great way to go with it. However, on the flip side of that, I cannot deal with real life horror books and real life movies. I say something like The Strangers, like the home invasion things, I can't watch because it's too close to home. It's too real for me. There's no barrier between reality and fantasy there. However, you put the craziest creature on there, some other things, or some serial killer who's has a little bit of uh, not reality put in there, like American Psycho, Silence of the Lambs or something like that, and that's fine. However, if it's something that I can see happening or read about on news, then I have to step back and and just kind of put up, that's my one line that I have trouble crossing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we all have our limits. And for me, very similarly, I don't like things that are too realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have had a gun pointed to my head, and in a situation that I was 19 years old and terrified and didn't know what to do. And I was able to talk my way out of it. And I am thankful for that every day, that that person was reasonable enough that I could talk them out of it. But it's something that to this day, that like action movies like Taken and stuff like that, those scare me more than a horror movie does.
Oh yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, first of all, I'm sorry that happened to you. I mean, I've had situations with guns before in my school settings, and it's. I mean, again, that's what sent me into therapy for the first time was because something like that. But and for me, it was having the ex fiance who tried to kill me with a kitchen knife, and again, thankfully, I'm 6'5" and she was 5'2", and I was able to use the self defense classes I've taught and to save my own ass there. But I mean, again, even though that happened, and even though I'm this bigger guy, everything else, I mean, talk about trauma. I blanked out pretty much most of that entire year that happened, just because I mean it was living. There were a bunch of other things that went along with it, but all the trauma, all the weird, crazy stuff that went on. Even now to this day, I still can't remember certain things that happened. But again, it's just one of those things where that line between the true horror and the our fun horror there's a barrier, and sometimes you can break through, and sometimes it's a hard wall that protects us.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So, on that line, what scares you personally?
Oh, again, I was just writing about this last night. I am severely claustrophobic, which is not good when you're 6'5". It sucks because everything gets small. Um, I'll have a near panic attack. I mean, just if I'm sitting in the back seat of a car when I can't move, that's one. Um, Anything with trying to think some other things. Nothing with animals or sharks or snakes or spiders or anything else like that because I've taught myself how to get past it. But just real people doing awful things. Again, I grew up in a kind of a really shady town in New Jersey, and again, I got mugged twice, and I've learned to be ultra cautious and vigilant of people around me. Even to this day, I mean, it's like I'm walking around, my eyes are always scoping out things around me. So again, it's that kind of that dark side of people that you never know where it's going to come from. The person could look friendly, but again, they can turn just like they did when I was 10 and when I was 12, when I was 14. So again, so something irrational like being closed in to just waiting to see is that guy who's walking towards me on the other side of the street, is he suddenly gonna like come over, and again, is that a paralyzing fear? No, but it's something that's always at the back of my head waiting for when come up. And I'm more scared for other people right now just because again, and I think not because I'm not scared of anything myself, but because for other people you lose that sense of control. You can control how you react to things and you could possibly fight back yourself. However, when it happens to somebody you love or care for, you have that control there is gone. And I think that's why a lot of us are afraid of for our family members, kids, parents, pets, whatever else, because we can't protect everything, a lot of times that'll render us powerless.
Yeah, I like that you bring it up that like when it's a personal situation, it's a lot different than when it's somebody we love. That's very, very true. For me personally, I was thinking about you saying the guy on the other street, and growing up female, um, that's always been something that I've had to worry about, right? And I learned that I'm not as brave as I think I am because I tried going camping by myself, and a drunk man walked through my campsite, and I immediately packed up and left. I was
Oh
like,
my,
I won't be staying the night. I'm gone.
wow. Okay, well, that's enough to scare anybody. Yeah, and again, I preface everything by saying it's like and I'm gonna talk to my students because again, I teach mostly females because we're taking psychology, and I love that they're exploring this dark side with me. But again, I tell them all the time. I said, listen, no matter what I say, I mean, I'm still a 6'5" white guy, and like so again, my experience is so vastly different than anybody else's. Just because again, I can't understand what it's like to live each day to like that to basically, again, all the obvious things, it's like I I can only imagine what it's like, where everywhere you're walking, having somebody who could potentially be coming at you or something else. And again, a lot of the girls who I've worked with in therapy and counseling tell me the same thing. But want to know? Let me ask you a little trivia question. The biggest interest of all my female students I've had in the last 5 years?
No, I would love to know though.
True crime. Um, and the more vicious, the better. And again, it's something I've wrestled with trying to understand. Because again, we're talking again. We can watch and read our horror, and that's fine. But they're diving into these documentaries that are horrible. And again, I consider myself, somewhat strong with mentally with horrors. However, I have my limit when it comes to real things, just because, again, like we've gone through trauma, we got some other things, and I can watch something about serial killers and show some pictures and they describe some horrible things, and I'll be like, okay, I'm done. I need to go do something else. Yet they're talking about, have you seen this documentary? Have you done this? It's like what they did with the bodies and how they got rid of things and how they did everything else, and they're utterly fascinated. And I've been asking them for years. I was like, why are you so into it? Like, I mean, guys aren't into this, but why are females into this so much? And I've gotten some of the strangest reactions, and the best ones I've gotten, people who can articulate it, is like they say, because you know what, we live with the threat of this every day, and if we watch it, we can put a little bit of distance there. So it's almost like not training, but they said, I don't want to paraphrase the wrong thing for them, but just that they can kind of distantly kind of learn about these awful people, and just in case something happens or something else, or they're faced with the situation. And it's almost like just taking these visual defense courses and learning about the most awful people out there, but again, through a screen. So
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about that.
I actually definitely agree with that because I listen to a little bit of true crime myself, here and there, mostly about hiking true crime. And I'm a hiker and a camper, so for me, that's what I do, and it gives me that appropriate amount of fear that I'm out there hiking by myself as a woman, and I need to be prepared for what could happen. And believe it or not, one of the biggest like theories is so absurd. The biggest theory of missing hikers is feral cannibals.
Wow.
But in actuality, a lot of them go missing because they get abducted into cults.
Oh, yes. And tell you that is a freaky subject to go into. Um, that is petrifying. Um, I hate to keep on pulling things back into my writing, but um, yeah, I growing up in a very constricting religious setting, not my house, but my schools. I've learned, okay, this is some scary crap, and it was, you want to talk cults? We have full blown cults. In fact, in my the novel that was just released, my Pierce the Veil novel, uh, you know, basically there are two antagonists there. One is one is a really sick cult, but again they play with their humanity, and the second half of it is an agent from the Catholic Church. I mean, and I asked some other readers, I say, when they have to figure out who's the scarier person, and they're like, aren't they the same? And it's frightening. But I love the cult thing. Is that to me is something I love reading about from a psychological standpoint. But again, if you think about it, I don't know if you have any cults near you. I know we have a few right near me, and to see how easily they can sway people into their grasp there, and how clouded their vision is, or how easily they're just brainwashed into whatever it may be in their mission. It tell you that. Okay, that's another thing that scares me is the whole cult pandemic.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is having low will, is we have people who have low will and low self-esteem even. And a lot of like QAnon, for example, which is that's a cult all in itself.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
uh, I've read a lot about the QAnon and how they got men to join them through going after really depressed young men on the internet and using their depression and their low self-esteem as a way to radicalize them.
That makes a whole lot of sense, and I'm glad you mentioned the male side of it, because we always hear about the female side of it, and I think
Mhm.
that's a half-assed argument there. Because again, I think we all know that no matter what gender you are, I mean, it's like you can have strong and weakness, and but again, the male side is not talked about enough, and the QAnon thing is a perfect comparison there. Again, how many males do you see? Not so much in our world, but I mean, because I think we're a little smarter than that, at least common sense wise. But who will fall for the dumbest crap? And I was out today. I saw one of those trucks riding by with all the horrible red flags and everything else like that, beaming its way through town. And I just sat on the side of the road and I was just laughing my butt off. I'm thinking, my God, what a sick cult. And and the guy turned and looked at me and with a completely clueless look, and I just kept on laughing. And around here, like somebody could have a like nice big gun or something else like that. I probably shouldn't be laughing, but it was just to witness that absurdity that and how easily they're pulled into it, and the dangerous behaviors that they can be persuaded into performing just because, again, you like I said, the low will, the low self esteem, everything else. If somebody can empower you, then boom. I mean, we're talking. There's not much difference between that and the Manson family.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a lot of people who go through narcotic use or alcoholism and end up being very religious because someone from a religious community helped save them from their addiction by using religion, and thus empowered them in that way, and they become almost radicalized in their new faith.
Yeah, and that was the keyword used, and again, it's a not very pleasant verb there. It's it, and I do believe that there are certain people in different faiths and different groups who are on the up and up, who are serious about things and just really do want to help people. However, growing up in the Catholic faith, going on there where I had nuns kicking my ass for being left-handed, it's again, I've been seeing it, religion being weaponized so much in my life, and I've seen it so often. Um, Again, with my son and other things, and just it's horrible. You can use that religion as a weapon, both psychologically and otherwise. It's quite it's frightening. Um, but I think now, I mean, everything's on the downslide from that, from at least organized religions going downhill. So I think hopefully people are kind of moving away from that because they have enough trauma in their life.
I hope so. Personally, I do hope so. I think that there are genuine people out there who have this faith and these beliefs and everything, and they mean no harm to anyone else. But I do think that there's been a lot of harm done, especially going back to the LGBT community and how much harm has been done to the LGBT community through religion.
Yep. And yeah, and that's the key there. Because again, you take somebody by by themselves there and just say, okay, here's our thought, here's our things, and here will be some nice safe thoughts, a worship or something else. It could be very safe and very welcoming. And I've had many friends who are in very open and welcoming churches. I mean, one of my best friends for 20 years. I mean, he went to church every single Saturday, and he never had to worry about coming out to them because they knew, and it was great for him and so many of my other friends. However, but again, there's powers in stupidity. Again, the more people put together, the more their asinine nature and their powers, their conformity powers, are just will go into it. And I think that it's so easily to be swayed when you have 100 people in front of you and somebody said, okay, this is bad, let's treat them like shit, as opposed to when you're alone in that same setting, comparatively speaking, just say, okay, if you were, I'm not a churchgoer now, but I'm saying if I was sitting in church by myself and somebody comes in who might be offensive to everybody else, I'm not going to act any differently because it's me. However, you get 100 people in that church, all of a sudden they can all do whatever in that mob mentality, and will do it all in the quote unquote name of higher being, which is frightening. But I mean, again, nothing new. I mean, thousands of years of this happening, but nobody's really caught on. Okay, it can be vicious, and I think that's one of the main reasons why so many people are turning away from organized religion, because they're seeing the hate, they're seeing the evil side of this, instead of the what it could be. And I think that's why people are saying, you know what, screw it, I'm done.
Yeah, I think so too. And with that all being said, I want to ask you one last question before I let you go anywhere. What is your favorite scary movie?
Oh, oh, I love that. There. Okay, I'm gonna probably try to cheat, but I won't. I will be honest with you because you're great. And I will go with The Thing, and for a bunch of different reasons. And I think that it goes back to a lot of what we were saying before with the masks and the different identities. And have you seen a movie?
I have seen the movie, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So basically, because again, it gets to a point where you don't know who's real and who's not, who can be evil and who's not, and basically it takes all your stability, all your securities, and just throws them out the window. And it's not so much the monster that I think is frightening. It's the thing is that you just all the comfort, everything that you feel good about is just turned upside down, thrown out the window, and that I think is scary. And I think we can all relate to it in some way, shape, or form when we find out somebody's not who that we thought they were, and which just happens all a lot. And when we're in a situation where like, okay, we have to put full trust in somebody, and it gets torn asunder. And then again, I think I read the original story about that from the 1980s. I think two version of it. Even the other movies that were tied into it still frighten me because, again, it's the whole thing about that loss of identity that gets to me.
Yeah, I can see that. Personally, my favorite horror movie is the Scream series,
Oh
so
yeah.
I'm pretty cheap on that.
No, it's not.
But so where can my listeners find your work and you?
Okay, well, I am on all the socials. I mean, Facebook, Instagram are my big ones. Under D Sims Muse, or just Dave Sims on Facebook. My website, which is David Sims Muse, MUSE, because that's what fires my soul. And again, You can. I welcome people chatting with me, talking to me about anything, whether it's books and movies, psychology, and issues going on, anything. Just to find me. And again, yeah, if people want to read my books, that's awesome. I'm always for that. However, I mean, I mean, most writers are lonely creatures, and we love to talk to people. So, again, if anybody wants to reach out, I would love to have you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've had a really great time. This was a very interesting conversation.
And thank you. I mean, thank you for being fascinating too. I mean, because this is fun. I mean, a conversation like this can go sideways quickly, but this you've done a marvelous job here, and I'm honored to be on your show. So thank you.
Thanks. You've been listening to Cat Scratch Radio, a horror podcast with your host, Carmilla Mays, also known as Matu C. Lawrence. If you want to find me on social media, just look up MX Carmilla.